Welcome back, mystery lovers. Before we begin, if you enjoy classic detective stories with unexpected twists, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Today, we journey to 1930s Egypt, where the brilliant Hercule Poirot faces one of his most baffling cases. When a long-lost tomb is discovered beneath the shadow of the Great Pyramid, an ambitious expedition becomes a nightmare of murder, ancient curses, and deadly secrets. But here's the question that will haunt you through every chapter. Can a 3,000-year-old curse truly kill, or is a living murderer hiding among the expedition, using ancient superstitions to cover their tracks? The Egyptian sun beat mercilessly upon the golden sands of Giza as Hercule Poirot adjusted his immaculate Panama hat and was careful not to disturb a single hair of his perfectly waxed moustache. It was the winter of 1934, and the little Belgian detective found himself far from the comforts of his London flat, standing in the shadow of the Great Pyramid. "Ah, mon ami," Poirot addressed his companion, Captain Arthur Hastings, who was mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "You see how the ancient Egyptians understood the geometry, the precision? It appeals to the little grey cells, does it not?" Hastings, ever the loyal if somewhat bewildered friend, nodded enthusiastically. "Quite remarkable, Poirot, though I must say this heat is rather unbearable." Their archaeological expedition, led by the renowned Sir Reginald Carstairs, had been in progress for 3 weeks. Sir Reginald, a distinguished Egyptologist with a white beard that rivaled Moses himself, we had invited Poirot as a gesture of gratitude. 2 years prior, Poirot had recovered Sir Reginald's stolen collection of ancient scarabs, a case that had baffled Scotland Yard for months. The expedition's camp consisted of several large tents arranged in a semicircle near the base of the second pyramid. Besides Sir Reginald and his team, the party included his daughter, the spirited Miss Victoria Carstairs, Dr. James Pemberton, a young archaeologist with ambitious eyes, Lady Margaret Ashford, a wealthy widow financing the expedition, her nephew, the Honourable Timothy Ashford, a bored aristocrat seeking adventure, and Miss Evelyn Rhodes, Sir Reginald's secretary, a quiet woman with observant eyes. That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of amber and crimson, the expedition gathered in the main tent for dinner. The conversation flowed around the day's discoveries, fragments of pottery, hieroglyphic inscriptions, and the promising entrance to a sealed chamber they had uncovered that morning. "Tomorrow," Sir Reginald announced, his voice trembling with excitement, "we shall break through the final seal. I am convinced we have found the tomb of Khaemwaset, the forgotten prince of the 19th Dynasty." Dr. Pemberton leaned forward eagerly. "The inscriptions match perfectly with the papyrus fragments we found in Luxor. This could be the discovery of the decade, Sir Reginald." Lady Ashford raised her wineglass. "Then we shall toast to tomorrow's success. How thrilling!" But Miss Rhodes, seated at the far end of the table, spoke softly. "The inscriptions also contained a warning, did they not? About disturbing the eternal sleep of the prince?" Sir Reginald waved dismissively. "Superstitious nonsense, my dear. These curses were merely devices to frighten tomb robbers. We are scientists, not thieves." Poirot, who had been observing the company with his penetrating green eyes, stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "Nonetheless, Mademoiselle Rhodes makes the good point. The ancients, they understood the psychology, yes? A curse is powerful not because it is real, but because people believe it to be so." Timothy Ashford laughed, a sound with an edge of mockery. "Surely you don't believe in such rot, Monsieur Poirot? You, a man of reason?" "I believe in the power of fear, monsieur. And fear, it can make people do the most extraordinary things." Victoria Carstairs shivered despite the warm evening air. "Father, see, perhaps we should proceed with caution. The workers have been speaking of evil omens, the sandstorm yesterday and Ahmed's accident with the falling stone." "Coincidences, nothing more," her father interrupted, though his tone had lost some of its certainty. As the evening progressed, Poirot noticed the undercurrents flowing beneath the surface of polite conversation. Dr. Pemberton's barely concealed ambition, the tension between Lady Ashford and her nephew, the way Miss Rhodes watched Sir Reginald with an expression Poirot could not quite decipher, and Victoria's protective concern for her father, mixed with something else. Was it fear or knowledge? Later, as Poirot and Hastings retired to their tent, Hastings remarked, "Fascinating group, what? Though I can't help feeling there's something off about the whole affair." Poirot nodded slowly, his fingers forming a steeple beneath his chin. "Your instincts, they serve you well, my friend. Yes, there is something not quite right here. The atmosphere, it is, how do you say, charged with anticipation. But of what nature, I cannot yet say." What neither man knew was that before the next sunset, one among their party would lie dead beneath the shadow of the pyramid, and the curse of Khaemwaset would seem terrifyingly real. Chapter 2. The seal is broken. The dawn arrived with an unusual stillness over the desert. Not even the slightest breeze disturbed the sand, and the workers whispered among themselves about the unnatural silence. Poirot, an early riser by habit, stood outside his tent observing the preparations for the day's momentous task. And Sir Reginald Carstairs was already at the excavation site, barking orders with the enthusiasm of a man half his age. The sealed entrance to the tomb gaped before them like a dark mouth, the ancient plaster bearing the unmistakable cartouche of Prince Khaemwaset, and beneath it, inscribed in hieroglyphs, the warning that Miss Rhodes had mentioned the previous evening. Dr. Pemberton stood beside the entrance, carefully photographing every detail. "Remarkable preservation," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "The seal is completely intact. We may very well be the first to enter in over 3,000 years." "The first, or perhaps the last," came a voice from behind them. They turned to find Ahmed Hassan, the head of the Egyptian workers, his weathered face grave with concern. "Forgive me, Sir Reginald, but the men are frightened. Last night, 3 of them heard sounds coming from within the pyramid, moaning as if the dead speak." Sir Reginald's face flushed with irritation. "Nonsense. It was merely the wind through the chambers. Tell the men there is nothing to fear but their own imaginations." "Perhaps," Poirot interjected gently, "it would ease their minds if we performed the proper rituals, a small gesture of respect to the ancients." Ahmed's eyes showed gratitude, but Sir Reginald would hear none of it. "We are here to advance science, not pander to superstition. Ahmed, please inform the men that any who wish to leave may do so, but they will forfeit their wages." The warning had its desired effect. The workers, though fearful, could not afford to lose their payment. Reluctantly, they assembled their tools and prepared to break through the ancient seal. By mid-morning, the entire expedition had gathered at the tomb entrance. Lady Ashford had dressed for the occasion in an absurdly elaborate outfit complete with a wide-brimmed hat and pearl necklace. Her nephew Timothy lounged against a supply crate, affecting boredom though his eyes betrayed keen interest. Victoria Carstairs stood close to her father, her face pale but determined. Miss Rhodes clutched a leather journal, ready to document every moment. "Gentlemen," Sir Reginald announced, "the moment has arrived. Dr. Pemberton, if you please." With careful precision, Dr. Pemberton began to chip away at the ancient plaster seal. Each strike of the chisel echoed across the desert like a death knell. The workers muttered prayers under their breath. Poirot watched intently, his eyes moving from face to face, noting every reaction, yet every subtle expression. Hastings stood beside him, caught up in the excitement. "I say, Poirot, this is rather thrilling, isn't it? To be present at such a discovery." "Thrilling, yes," Poirot murmured. "But observe, mon ami, observe carefully. See how Dr. Pemberton's hands? They tremble slightly. And Lady Ashford, she watches not the tomb, but the faces of others. And young Victoria, she holds her father's arm as if to prevent him from entering. Most curious." The seal finally gave way with a sound like a sigh, or perhaps a warning. A rush of stale air, trapped for millennia, escaped from the darkness within. Several people gasped and stepped back. The smell was not unpleasant, merely ancient, carrying with it the weight of 3,000 years. Sir Reginald, trembling with anticipation, he held up his electric torch and peered into the gloom. "The passage is clear," he exclaimed. "Come, we must see what lies beyond." "Father, please," Victoria pleaded. "Perhaps we should wait until tomorrow. Ensure the air is safe." "My dear child, I have waited my entire career for this moment. I shall not wait another day." Against all protests, Sir Reginald stepped into the tomb, followed by an eager Dr. Pemberton. Poirot, sensing danger but unable to articulate its nature, followed at a discreet distance with Hastings close behind. Lady Ashford, Timothy, and Victoria hesitated, then entered as well, leaving only Miss Rhodes and Ahmed outside, the former pale as death, the latter murmuring prayers. The passage descended steeply into the earth, the walls covered with exquisite paintings that seemed to dance in the torchlight, on gods and demons, kings and servants, all frozen in eternal procession toward the burial chamber. The air grew colder as they descended, and Poirot felt an oppressive weight, though whether from the millions of tons of stone above or something less tangible, he could not say. They emerged into a chamber of breathtaking beauty. Golden artifacts glinted in the torchlight, statues of Anubis and Thoth, canopic jars of alabaster, furniture inlaid with ivory and precious stones, and, in the center, a magnificent sarcophagus of red granite, its lid carved with the serene face of Prince Khaemwaset. "Magnificent," Dr. Pemberton breathed. "Absolutely magnificent." Sir Reginald moved toward the sarcophagus as if in a trance. "At last," he whispered. "At last, I have found you." But as his hand reached out to touch the ancient stone, a terrible sound filled the chamber, a grinding, rumbling noise that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Dust began to fall from the ceiling. "Back!" Poirot shouted. "Everyone, out at once!" They fled up the passage as the rumbling grew louder. Behind them, they heard the crash of falling stone. They burst from the tomb entrance, coughing and covered in dust, just as a section of the passage collapsed with a deafening roar. For several moments, no one spoke. Then Lady Ashford began to laugh, a high, hysterical sound. "The curse!" she cried. "The curse is real!" Poirot dusted off his suit with meticulous care, his face grave. "A curse, perhaps, or perhaps something far more dangerous, a human hand with murderous intent." Sir Reginald stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Sir Reginald, that ancient tombs do not collapse so conveniently. Someone, I think, wishes to prevent this excavation from continuing. The question is, who, and more importantly, why?" As if in answer, a scream pierced the afternoon air. Miss Rhodes, pointing toward the shadow of the Great Pyramid where a figure lay crumpled in the sand. It was Ahmed Hassan, and even from a distance they could see the unnatural angle of his neck. The curse of Khaemwaset had claimed its first victim. Chapter 3. Death in the Desert. Inspector. Mahmoud Rashid of the Egyptian police arrived within 2 hours, his motorcar kicking up clouds of sand as it approached the excavation camp. He was a tall, dignified man with a neatly trimmed mustache and eyes that missed very little, a fact that Poirot appreciated immediately. "Monsieur Poirot," Inspector Rashid said, was shaking hands with the Belgian detective. "Your reputation precedes you. I confess I am relieved to find you here, though the circumstances are most unfortunate." They stood beside the body of Ahmed Hassan, which had been covered with a canvas sheet. The workers had retreated to their tents, refusing to come near what they believed was a cursed place. "You know of me?" Poirot asked, one eyebrow raised. "But of course. The case of the Nile steamer, 3 years ago? You exposed the killer of Lord Davenport. The Cairo police still speak of your methods." Inspector Rashid knelt beside the body. "Now, tell me what you have observed." Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. A policeman who asked rather than assumed. This was refreshing indeed. "The death, it was made to appear as an accident, yes? A fall from the pyramid, perhaps while climbing. But observe, Inspector, the position of the body." Inspector Rashid studied the corpse carefully. Ahmed Hassan lay face down, his head at an unnatural angle, clearly indicating a broken neck. But Poirot pointed to the sand around the body. "You see, there is no disturbance in the sand such as would be made by a falling body. No impact crater, as it were. The sand here, it is smooth, undisturbed, except directly beneath the body." "So he was killed elsewhere and brought here," Inspector Rashid concluded. "Précisément, and observe the hands, if you please." The inspector examined Ahmed's hands, which were clenched tightly. With careful effort, he pried open the right hand to reveal several small objects, fragments of painted plaster, still bearing traces of ancient hieroglyphs. Poirot nodded with satisfaction. These, they came from the tomb seal, non? Ahmed Hassan, he was clutching them when he died, which means he was killed shortly after the seal was broken, and these fragments, they remained in his hand. But why would he take pieces of the seal? Hastings asked, having joined them along with Sir Reginald and Dr. Pemberton. That, mon ami, is the question most pertinent. Poirot turned to Sir Reginald. Tell me, was Ahmed Hassan in your employ for a long time? Sir Reginald nodded, visibly shaken. 5 years. He was invaluable. Knew the desert, the workers, the local customs. I trusted him completely. And did he have family, enemies, debts? A wife and 3 children in the village. As for enemies... Sir Reginald paused. There was a disagreement last week with one of the other workers, Farouk. Something about wages, I believe. But surely that wouldn't lead to murder. Inspector Rashid made a note. I will question this, Farouk. But Monsieur Poirot, you mentioned the curse. Ah, the curse. Poirot's moustache quivered with disdain. The curse? It is the smoke screen, you comprehend? Someone wishes us to believe that the ancient spirits have awakened. But Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in spirits. He believes in facts, in logic, in the psychology of the human mind. Dr. Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. Are you suggesting that one of us killed Ahmed? That's preposterous. What possible motive could any of us have? Motives, Monsieur le Docteur, they are like the layers of sand in the desert. One must dig deep to uncover them. Poirot's gaze swept over the assembled company. But let us establish the facts. After we evacuated the tomb, what did each of you do? Victoria Carstairs spoke first, her voice steady despite her pale complexion. I went to my tent to change clothes. I was covered in dust. I remained at the tomb entrance, Dr. Pemberton said. I wanted to assess the damage from the collapse. Lady Ashford fanned herself dramatically. I returned to the main tent. That dreadful experience had quite undone my nerves. Timothy accompanied me. Timothy Ashford nodded lazily. Quite so. Aunt Margaret required her smelling salts. And you, Sir Reginald? Poirot asked. I was speaking with the workers, trying to calm their fears. Miss Rhodes was with me, taking notes for the official record. Poirot turned to Miss Rhodes, who had been standing silently in the background. And you, mademoiselle, you saw nothing unusual? See no one approaching Ahmed Hassan? Miss Rhodes hesitated, her fingers twisting the leather journal she always carried. I was focused on my notes. But now that you mention it, I did see Ahmed walking toward the pyramid about 20 minutes after we left the tomb. He seemed agitated. Agitated? In what way? He was muttering to himself, looking back over his shoulder as if afraid of being followed. I thought perhaps he was going to pray. Many of the workers go to the pyramids to seek divine protection. Inspector Rashid frowned. But the pyramids are not mosques. Why would he go there to pray? An excellent question, Poirot murmured. Unless perhaps he went there not to pray, but to meet someone. See, someone who then killed him and arranged the body to suggest an accident or a supernatural occurrence. A tense silence fell over the group. Somewhere in the distance, a desert fox called out, its cry echoing across the sands like a warning. Sir Reginald cleared his throat. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Rashid, I assure you that everyone in my expedition is beyond reproach. There must be another explanation. Bandits, perhaps, or perhaps, a new voice interrupted. The explanation lies in what you found in that tomb. They turned to see a stranger approaching from the direction of the road, a thin, angular man in his 50s, dressed in a linen suit and carrying a walking stick. His face was deeply tanned, and his eyes held a feverish intensity. Who are you? Sir Reginald demanded. The stranger smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. My name is Professor Edmund Blackwood. I believe we have corresponded, Sir Reginald, though you chose to ignore my warnings. Recognition dawned on Sir Reginald's face, followed by anger. You're that lunatic who's been sending me threatening letters. Not threats, Sir Reginald. Warnings. I told you that the tomb of Khaemwaset should not be disturbed. I told you that death would follow. Professor Blackwood looked at Ahmed's covered body. And so it has. Poirot stepped forward, his manner courteous but his eyes sharp as flint. "Professor Blackwood, your timing, it is most interesting. You appear here, at this precise moment, when a man lies dead. How did you know to come today?" Blackwood met Poirot's gaze without flinching. "I have been watching this excavation for weeks, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I know who you are. As I came today because I knew Sir Reginald planned to open the tomb. I came to prevent a catastrophe, but I see I am too late." "Too late to prevent, or too late to escape notice?" Poirot suggested softly. Before Blackwood could respond, a commotion erupted from the workers' tents. One of the Egyptian workers came running, his face a mask of terror. "The tomb!" he shouted in Arabic, which Inspector Rashid quickly translated. "There are lights moving in the tomb. The dead prince walks." Despite themselves, everyone turned to look at the pyramid. And there, impossible yet undeniable, a faint glow could be seen emanating from the tomb entrance. A cold, blue-green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lady Ashford screamed. Several workers fell to their knees in prayer. Even Dr. Pemberton had gone pale. But Hercule Poirot merely smiled, a small, or a knowing smile that made his mustache twitch with satisfaction. "Ah," he said quietly. "Now the game, it becomes most interesting. For ghosts, they do not carry electric torches, no? Someone is in that tomb, mes amis, and I think that someone, they have much to hide." He turned to Inspector Rashid. "Come, mon ami, let us see what the spirits are doing in the darkness, shall we?" Chapter 4. Secrets Beneath the Sand. Poirot led the way toward the tomb entrance, his small figure moving with surprising determination across the darkening sand. Inspector Rashid followed close behind, his hand resting on the revolver at his belt. Hastings, ever loyal, came third, though his face betrayed considerable apprehension. "I say, Poirot," Hastings whispered urgently, "shouldn't we wait for reinforcements? If there's someone dangerous in there—" "Precisely because there is someone in there, we must act now," Poirot replied. "Every moment we delay, evidence may be destroyed, secrets may be hidden more deeply." Sir Reginald insisted on accompanying them, as did Dr. Pemberton. Professor Blackwood, to everyone's surprise, also stepped forward. "If you're going in, so am I. I have as much right as anyone to see what lies within." The eerie blue-green light still flickered from within the tomb entrance, casting strange shadows on the ancient stones. As they approached, Poirot held up his hand, signaling silence. He listened intently, his head tilted like a bird. From within came sounds, the scrape of stone on stone, a muffled curse, the clatter of something metallic falling. "Someone searches for something," Poirot murmured. "And they search with urgency." Inspector Rashid drew his revolver. "Come out at once," he called in Arabic, then English. "This is the police. Show yourself." The sounds within ceased abruptly. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the darkness of the tomb, covered head to toe in dust, holding an electric torch that cast the strange bluish light. It was Miss Evelyn Rhodes. Her appearance was shocking. The prim secretary was disheveled, her hair loose around her shoulders, her dress torn, her hands bleeding from scrapes and cuts. In one hand she clutched the electric torch, in the other a small object wrapped in cloth. "Miss Rhodes," Sir Reginald exclaimed, "what in heaven's name are you doing in the tomb? I expressly forbade anyone from entering after the collapse." Miss Rhodes stood frozen, see her eyes darting from face to face like a trapped animal. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she began to laugh, a wild, desperate sound that echoed off the pyramid stones. "Forbade?" she repeated. "You forbade? How dare you, Reginald Carstairs? How dare you, after everything?" The use of Sir Reginald's Christian name shocked everyone. Victoria gasped. Dr. Pemberton took a step backward. Poirot, however, merely nodded as if something had been confirmed. "Ah, I see. You are not merely his secretary, are you, mademoiselle? There is history between you, no?" Miss Rhodes's laughter died away, replaced by bitter tears. "History? Yes, you could call it that. 25 years of history. 25 years of being hidden away, denied, treated as if I were nothing more than a servant." Sir Reginald had gone deathly pale. "Evelyn, please." Don't what? Don't tell the truth?" She turned to the others, her face twisted with anguish. "Shall I tell them, Reginald, or will you? Shall I tell them that I am not merely your secretary, but your wife?" The declaration fell like a thunderbolt. Victoria swayed and would have fallen had Dr. Pemberton not caught her arm. Inspector Rashid's eyes widened. Even Professor Blackwood looked stunned. "That's impossible," Victoria cried. "My father has never married. My mother died when I was born, and he—" "Your mother?" Miss Rhodes laughed again, but this time with infinite sadness. "Oh, my dear child, your mother did not die. She was sent away in disgrace because she made the mistake of falling in love with an ambitious archaeologist who valued his reputation more than his family." Sir Reginald sank down onto a rock, on his face in his hands. "It was different then," he said hoarsely. "My career, the scandal. Your father was a tradesman, Evelyn. The Archaeological Society would never have accepted. So you married me in secret, then abandoned me when I became pregnant," Miss Rhodes finished bitterly. "You took Victoria from me, raised her as an orphan, and paid me to stay silent. And I did, God help me, because I thought someday you might acknowledge us, might—" Her voice broke. Poirot's expression was one of infinite compassion. "But something changed, did it not, mademoiselle? Something about this expedition?" Miss Rhodes nodded, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. 3 months ago, I discovered that Reginald planned to marry Lady Ashford once this expedition concluded. A respectable marriage to secure more funding, more prestige. And as if our marriage, our daughter, meant nothing. Lady Ashford, still standing at a distance with Timothy, gasped audibly. "Reginald, is this true? You proposed to me while being married to this woman?" "The marriage was never legal," Sir Reginald protested. "It was performed by a village priest in Syria, not recognized by English law." "It was recognized by God and by me," Miss Rhodes said quietly. "And by the laws of common decency, you owed me more than silence and shame." Inspector Rashid stepped forward, his voice professional. "Miss Rhodes, I must ask you, did you kill Ahmed Hassan?" Miss Rhodes looked genuinely shocked. "Kill Ahmed? No. Why would I? He was the only one who showed me kindness, who treated me as a human being rather than a piece of furniture." "Then what were you doing in the tomb?" Poirot asked gently. "And what is it that you hold in your hand?" Miss Rhodes looked down at the cloth-wrapped object, as if surprised to find it there. Slowly, she unwrapped it, revealing an ancient papyrus scroll, remarkably well preserved. "I was looking for this," she said. "Ahmed told me about it yesterday. He said he had seen something in the tomb, something that the prince's priests had hidden, a scroll that contained a record of a great injustice, a wife who had been cast aside, forgotten by history." She held out the scroll, and Dr. Pemberton, unable to resist his scholarly instincts, took it carefully and began to examine it by torchlight. His eyes widened as he read. "Extraordinary," he breathed. "This is a letter from Prince Khaemwaset's wife, Princess Tausret. It details how the prince took a second wife of higher birth and ordered the first wife's name to be erased from all records. She was sent away to live in obscurity while her son was raised to believe she was dead." Miss Rhodes smiled sadly. "History repeats itself, you see. Even across 3,000 years, the sins of men remain the same." "This is all very touching," Professor Blackwood interjected, his voice sharp, "but it does not explain the murder. If Miss Rhodes did not kill Ahmed Hassan, who did?" "An excellent question," Poirot agreed. "And one that leads us to another question. Why was Ahmed Hassan killed? What did he know or see that made him dangerous?" Inspector Rashid had been examining the scroll carefully. "Monsieur Poirot, there is something else here. This papyrus, it has been damaged recently. See? Oh, these tears at the edge. They are fresh, not ancient. Something has been removed from it." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. He took the papyrus and studied it with his magnifying glass, which he always carried in his waistcoat pocket. "You are correct, Inspector. And see here, the tear, it matches precisely with the fragments we found in Ahmed Hassan's hand." Understanding dawned on Hastings' face. Then Ahmed tore part of the scroll. But why? "Because," Poirot said slowly, "he recognized something in the writing, something that revealed a truth dangerous to someone in this camp. He tore it away, perhaps intending to use it as evidence or as protection. Instead, it cost him his life. Victoria, who had been silent since the shocking revelation about her mother, suddenly spoke up. But who could read ancient Egyptian well enough to understand what the scroll said? Only Father and Dr. Pemberton have that skill. Poirot turned to Dr. Pemberton, who had gone very pale. "Is that true, Monsieur le Docteur? Are you and Sir Reginald the only ones who can read hieratic script?" Dr. Pemberton's hands shook as he held the papyrus. "Yes, among our party. But I swear, I never saw this scroll before tonight. I never—" "And yet," Poirot interrupted softly, "you recognized immediately what it was when Miss Rhodes showed it to us. You read it with ease. And I observed something most interesting. When you read it, your expression, it was not surprise, but confirmation, as if you already knew what it would say." "That's absurd," Dr. Pemberton protested. "I simply have expertise in more than archaeology, I think," Poirot said. Inspector Rashid, I suggest you search Dr. Pemberton's tent. I believe you will find something most illuminating." Inspector Rashid nodded to his two constables, who had arrived with him earlier. They moved toward the tents, but Dr. Pemberton suddenly bolted, running toward the darkness of the desert. He didn't get far. Professor Blackwood, moving with surprising agility, thrust his walking stick between the younger man's legs, sending him sprawling into the sand. As the constables pulled Dr. Pemberton to his feet, something fell from his pocket. A leather notebook, its pages covered with notes and calculations. And tucked between the pages, a fragment of ancient papyrus torn at the edges, the missing piece of the scroll. Poirot picked it up carefully, his face grave. "Ah, Dr. Pemberton, I think you have much to explain, no? Starting, see perhaps, with why you found it necessary to commit murder to protect your secrets." Chapter 5. The Archaeologist's Confession. Dr. James Pemberton sat in the main tent, his hands bound, his earlier confidence completely shattered. The notebook and papyrus fragment lay on the table before him like damning evidence at a trial. Poirot sat opposite, his green eyes fixed upon the young archaeologist with the intensity of a cat watching a mouse. Inspector Rashid stood behind Pemberton, while the others, Sir Reginald, Miss Rhodes, Victoria, Lady Ashford, Timothy, Professor Blackwood, and Hastings, formed a silent audience to what promised to be a dramatic revelation. "Now then, Dr. Pemberton," Poirot began, his voice deceptively gentle, "shall we begin with the truth? It will, I assure you, make things much simpler." Pemberton stared at the table. His jaw clenched. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a sound like a sob, he spoke. "I didn't mean to kill him. You must believe me. It was an accident, a terrible accident. Accidents do not typically involve hiding bodies and staging elaborate scenes," Inspector Rashid observed dryly. "Tell us what happened," Poirot urged. "Start from the beginning. Why did you enter the tomb alone after the collapse?" Pemberton raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed. "Because I had to find it, the real treasure of Khaemwaset's tomb. Not the gold or the artifacts that Sir Reginald was so excited about, something far more valuable." Sir Reginald leaned forward. "What are you talking about? What treasure?" "The library of Khaemwaset," Pemberton said, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "But historical records mention that Prince Khaemwaset was not only a prince, but a scholar, a keeper of ancient knowledge. It was said he possessed scrolls containing secrets from the Old Kingdom, medical knowledge, astronomical calculations, and most importantly, the location of the lost tomb of Imhotep himself." A collective gasp went through the tent. Even Poirot, who rarely showed surprise, raised his eyebrows. Imhotep, the legendary architect of the first pyramid, later deified as a god of wisdom and medicine, was one of ancient Egypt's greatest mysteries. Professor Blackwood's eyes gleamed with sudden understanding. "That's why you were so eager to join this expedition. Not for academic glory, but for what you hope to find." "I've devoted my entire career to finding Imhotep's tomb," Pemberton said desperately. "Do you understand what that would mean? The greatest archaeological discovery of all time? My name would be remembered forever, alongside Carter and Champollion. But first, Poirot interjected, you had to ensure that Sir Reginald did not discover these scrolls before you. That is why you caused the collapse in the tomb, non? Pemberton's silence was confirmation enough. Mon Dieu, Poirot continued, you rigged the collapse to frighten Sir Reginald, to delay the excavation so you could search the tomb in secret. But you did not anticipate that Ahmed Hassan would follow you, would see what you were doing. He wasn't supposed to be there, Pemberton burst out. I waited until everyone was occupied, until I thought the camp was quiet. I slipped into the tomb with my torch and began searching. See, I found the scroll, Princess Tausret's letter, and I was reading it when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Ahmed? Inspector Rashid prompted. Pemberton nodded miserably. He had followed me, suspicious of my behavior. When he saw the scroll, he demanded to know what I was doing. He tried to take it from me, said he would report me to Sir Reginald. We struggled and the scroll tore. Ahmed grabbed the fragment and ran. And you pursued him, Poirot said quietly. I had to. Don't you see? That fragment contained the crucial information, a reference to where Khaemwaset had hidden the deeper scrolls, the ones about Imhotep. Without it, all my years of research would be worthless. Pemberton's voice rose hysterically. I chased him out of the tomb. He ran toward the pyramid, thinking perhaps he could hide there or find help. But I caught him near the base. Victoria had her hand over her mouth, her face pale. Miss Rhodes held her daughter close, tears streaming down her face. We fought, Pemberton continued, his voice breaking. I only meant to get the scroll back, but Ahmed was stronger than he looked. He pushed me away, and in anger, I picked up a rock and struck him. Just once. But it was enough. He fell, and his neck, I heard it snap. The silence in the tent was oppressive. Even the desert wind seemed to have stilled, as if nature itself held its breath. And then? Poirot asked, his voice hard now. You arranged the body to make it appear he had fallen from the pyramid? I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't let anyone know I had been in the tomb. Couldn't let them find out about the scrolls. So I dragged his body to where you found it. Tried to make it look like an accident or... He swallowed hard. Or like the curse. The blue-green light in the tomb tonight, Inspector Rashid said. That was you again, searching for more scrolls? Yes. I thought with everyone distracted by Ahmed's death and the curse hysteria, I could finish my search. But Miss Rhodes... He looked at her with something like accusation. You were there. Why? Miss Rhodes met his gaze steadily. Because Ahmed came to me yesterday, before he died. He told me he had discovered something remarkable in the tomb. Not treasure, but a story of a forgotten wife. He said it reminded him of my situation. He was going to help me prove my marriage to Reginald, to help Victoria understand the truth. He was a good man, Dr. Pemberton. And you killed him for a piece of paper. The contempt in her voice made Pemberton flinch. Poirot picked up the papyrus fragment carefully, studying it through his magnifying glass. This fragment, it reveals the location of the additional scrolls? Pemberton nodded dully. There's a hidden chamber beneath the burial chamber. The entrance is concealed behind the sarcophagus. I would have found it tonight if I hadn't been interrupted. Sir Reginald stood abruptly, his face a mixture of anger and anguish. You murdered an innocent man for academic glory? A man who worked for me, who trusted us? How could you, James? I trained you, mentored you, treated you like a son. You treated me like an assistant, Pemberton shot back with sudden venom. Always your discoveries, your glory, your name on the papers. I was tired of being in your shadow. Reginald, tired of watching you take credit for work we did together. So this, Poirot mused, this was not merely about Imhotep's tomb. This was about resentment, about ambition thwarted, about a young man who felt he deserved more than he had been given. Professor Blackwood, who had been silent throughout the confession, suddenly spoke. Monsieur Poirot, there is something that troubles me. Dr. Pemberton says he killed Ahmed for the scroll fragment, but how did he know the fragment contained information about Imhotep? Ahmed took it and ran. Pemberton never had a chance to read it before the murder. All eyes turned to the professor, then to Pemberton, whose face had gone white. Poirot's moustache quivered with approval. Ah, Professor Blackwood, you have touched upon the very question that has been troubling me. An excellent observation. So, Dr. Pemberton, how did you know what the fragment contained? Pemberton's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Unless, Poirot continued softly, you had already seen the scroll before. Unless you had already been in the tomb previously, perhaps yesterday, before the seal was officially broken? The accusation hung in the air. Inspector Rashid's hand moved to his revolver. That's impossible, Sir Reginald protested. The seal was intact when we broke it this morning. I examined it myself. A seal can be broken and remade, Poirot said. With the correct materials and knowledge, it is not so difficult. Is that not so, Dr. Pemberton? You are, after all, an expert in ancient Egyptian construction techniques. Pemberton slumped in his chair, defeated. I entered 2 nights ago, he admitted, while everyone slept. I broke the seal carefully, entered the tomb, found the scrolls, and read them. Then I resealed the entrance. No one would have known if Ahmed hadn't suspected something and started watching me. 2 nights ago, Timothy Ashford spoke up for the first time, his lazy drawl gone. That was the night we heard the strange sounds from the pyramid. The workers thought it was ghosts, but it was you, wasn't it, moving about in the tomb? Yes, Pemberton whispered. Poirot nodded slowly. So when you caused the collapse this morning, it was not to delay Sir Reginald, but to obscure evidence of your earlier entry, to make it appear that the tomb's condition was due to natural settling rather than human interference. You thought of everything, Inspector Rashid said with grudging admiration. Or almost everything. You did not anticipate Ahmed Hassan's loyalty or observation skills. Nor, Professor Blackwood added, did you anticipate Hercule Poirot. Poirot inclined his head modestly. The little grey cells, they do what they can. But even as Inspector Rashid ordered his men to take Pemberton into custody, Poirot's expression remained troubled. Hastings, who knew his friend well, noticed immediately. Poirot, is something wrong? We've solved the case, haven't we? Poirot steepled his fingers beneath his chin, his eyes distant. We have solved the murder of Ahmed Hassan, yes, but there is something that does not quite fit, a piece of the puzzle that remains elusive. What do you mean? Sir Reginald asked. Tell me, Poirot said. The sounds in the pyramid 2 nights ago, they were reported by how many workers? 3, Sir Reginald replied, puzzled. Why? And they heard moaning, yes, as if the dead speak? That's what they said, but surely that was just Pemberton moving about? Perhaps, Poirot murmured. Perhaps. And yet... He stood suddenly, his face grave. Inspector Rashid, I suggest you post guards around the tomb tonight, and tomorrow we should examine this hidden chamber that Dr. Pemberton mentioned. For I have a feeling, and Hercule Poirot's feelings are rarely wrong, that this mystery is not yet finished. As if to emphasize his words, a sound echoed across the desert, a long, low moan that seemed to come from the very heart of the pyramid itself. The curse of Khaemwaset, it seemed, was not yet done with them. To Chapter 6, The Hidden Chamber. Dawn broke over the desert with an ominous crimson hue, as if the very sky warned of blood to be spilled. Poirot had slept little, his mind turning over the pieces of the puzzle that refused to fit together properly. Something about Dr. Pemberton's confession troubled him, though he could not yet articulate precisely what. The night had passed without incident, despite the eerie moaning that had echoed from the pyramid. The guards Inspector Rashid had posted reported nothing unusual, though they admitted the sounds had unnerved them considerably. Now, as the expedition gathered once more at the tomb entrance, the atmosphere was markedly different from the excitement of the previous day. Dr. Pemberton sat in a tent under guard, awaiting transport to Cairo. The workers whispered among themselves, on many demanding to leave despite their need for wages. Ahmed Hassan's body had been taken to the village for proper burial, and his widow's wails of grief had been heard throughout the night. Are we quite certain this is wise? Lady Ashford asked, fanning herself nervously. After everything that's happened, surely we should abandon this cursed place? On the contrary, madame, Poirot replied. It is precisely because of what has happened that we must continue. There are questions still unanswered, and I believe the answers lie in the hidden chamber Dr. Pemberton mentioned. Sir Reginald, who had aged a decade overnight with the twin revelations of his secret marriage and his protégé's murderous actions, nodded wearily. Monsieur Poirot is right. Now we owe it to Ahmed's memory to see this through properly. Victoria stood close to Miss Rhodes, to her mother, as she was now learning to think of her. The young woman's world had been shattered and rebuilt in the space of a day, and the emotional toll was evident in her pale face and red-rimmed eyes. Yet there was a strength there too, inherited perhaps from both her parents. Professor Blackwood had proven surprisingly helpful, offering his expertise in tomb architecture. Despite his earlier warnings about the curse, he seemed driven by scientific curiosity to see what lay beneath. Timothy Ashford, to everyone's surprise, had volunteered to join the exploration. "Might as well see what all the fuss is about," he drawled, though his eyes betrayed a genuine interest he usually took pains to conceal. The party descended into the tomb. Poirot, Sir Inspector Rashid, Sir Reginald, Professor Blackwood, Timothy, and Hastings. Victoria and Miss Rhodes remained at the entrance with the guards, having seen quite enough of ancient tombs for one expedition. The passage down was exactly as Poirot remembered, the beautiful paintings seeming to watch their progress with knowing eyes. The burial chamber, when they reached it, took on a different character in the light of multiple electric torches. The golden artifacts gleamed with an almost malevolent beauty, and the sarcophagus of Prince Khaemwaset dominated the space like an accusation. According to Pemberton's notes, Inspector Rashid said, consulting the leather notebook, the entrance to the hidden chamber should be behind the sarcophagus, honey concealed in the wall. It took the combined effort of all 6 men to shift the massive granite sarcophagus even slightly. As they pushed, Poirot noticed something curious. The base of the sarcophagus had been scraped recently, the stone beneath showing fresh marks. "Someone has moved this before," he observed. "And recently, I think." "Pemberton, during his secret visit," Sir Reginald suggested. "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, but his tone suggested doubt. Once the sarcophagus had been moved sufficiently, they examined the wall behind it. Professor Blackwood ran his hands over the stones, pressing and probing with the expertise of long experience. "Here," he exclaimed, "do you see? This block is slightly different in color, and these hieroglyphs, they're a formula, a combination, if you will." Following the ancient instructions, and they pressed a sequence of carved symbols. With a grinding sound that made them all jump, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage descending even deeper into the earth. "Extraordinary," Sir Reginald breathed. "A tomb within a tomb." The passage was cramped and oppressively close. They descended in single file, their torches creating dancing shadows on walls covered with more hieroglyphs. These inscriptions, Poirot noted, were different from those above, more hastily carved, as if done in secret. At the bottom of the passage, they emerged into a small chamber. What they found there made even Poirot, who prided himself on his composure, gasp in astonishment. The chamber was not a burial room, but a library. Wooden shelves, miraculously preserved by the dry air, lined the walls, and upon them rested dozens of papyrus scrolls, each carefully labeled in ancient script. In the center of the room stood a writing desk of cedar wood, and upon it lay an open scroll, as if someone had been reading it recently. "The Library of Khaemwaset," Professor Blackwood whispered in awe. "It's real. It actually exists." Sir Reginald moved toward the scrolls with trembling hands. "The knowledge contained here. This is beyond price, beyond anything I ever dreamed of discovering." But Poirot was examining the room with a different focus. "Gentlemen, observe the dust on the floor. You see? Footprints, and quite fresh ones." They all looked down. Indeed, the fine dust that covered the floor showed clear evidence of recent disturbance. The footprints led from the entrance to the writing desk and back again. Pemberton's prints," Timothy suggested, "from his secret visit?" "Perhaps," Poirot said again, that same note of doubt in his voice. He moved to the writing desk and examined the open scroll. "Professor Blackwood, you read hieratic script, non? What does this say?" Professor Blackwood peered at the scroll, his lips moving silently as he translated. Slowly, his face went pale. "What is it?" Inspector Rashid demanded. It's a confession," Professor Blackwood said slowly. Written by Prince Khaemwaset himself in the final years of his life. He writes of a great betrayal, of how he wronged his first wife and legitimized his second son over his firstborn. He speaks of guilt and... The professor paused, his voice shaking. And of how he arranged for certain scrolls to be hidden here. Two scrolls that would prove his firstborn son was the rightful heir, not the son who became pharaoh after him. Historical revisionism, Sir Reginald said, fascinated despite himself. If this became known, it would rewrite our understanding of the 19th Dynasty succession. But that's not all, Professor Blackwood continued, still reading. He writes that anyone who disturbs this chamber without proper authority, anyone who seeks these secrets for personal gain rather than truth, will face not the curse of the gods, but something far worse, the curse of their own guilty conscience, which will drive them to madness and death. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Hastings cleared his throat nervously. Well, that's just superstition, isn't it? The guilty conscience part, I mean. Is it? Poirot mused. He had been examining the footprints more closely. Tell me, gentlemen, how many people do you think have entered this chamber? They looked at the footprints more carefully. Inspector Rashid, trained in observation, spoke first. At least 2 different people. See? 2 different shoe sizes. 2 different patterns of wear. Précisément. Dr. Pemberton entered here, yes, we know this, but someone else also came here, and quite recently, perhaps even last night. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The guards heard sounds from the pyramid. We assumed it was merely the wind or settling stone. But what if it was another person searching this chamber? But who? Sir Reginald demanded. Pemberton is under guard, and everyone else... He was interrupted by a sound from above. A woman's scream, sharp and terrified, echoing down the passage. Victoria's voice. They scrambled back up the passage with desperate speed, Poirot moving with surprising agility for a man of his build. They emerged into the burial chamber, then rushed up toward the entrance. What they found at the tomb entrance stopped them in their tracks. Victoria stood trembling, pointing at something on the ground. Miss Rhodes knelt beside it, her face ashen. The guards stood nearby, their weapons drawn but their expressions confused. On the ground, arranged in a deliberate pattern, lay a collection of objects: a golden scarab, an alabaster canopic jar, and a small statue of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of death. And beside these artifacts, written in the sand in clear English letters, was a message. The guilty shall be judged. The innocent shall be spared. The truth shall be revealed. Who did this? Inspector Rashid demanded of the guards. They shook their heads, bewildered. No one approached, sir. We would have seen them. These objects, they were not here 5 minutes ago. Poirot knelt beside the artifacts, examining them closely. These pieces, they come from the burial chamber. Someone took them from below and brought them here. He looked up at Victoria. What made you scream, mademoiselle? Victoria pointed with a shaking hand toward the Great Pyramid. I thought I saw a figure, dressed in ancient robes, standing at the base of the pyramid. When I looked directly at it, it vanished like smoke. Mass hysteria, Timothy said, though his voice lacked conviction. The power of suggestion after all that's happened. But Miss Rhodes shook her head. I saw it too. So just for a moment, but I saw it. A figure in white linen with the face of... She shuddered. It sounds mad, but it had the face of a jackal. The mask of Anubis, Professor Blackwood said quietly. The guardian of the dead, the judge of souls. Poirot stood, brushing sand from his immaculate trousers. His face was grave, his usual confidence replaced by something like concern. Mes amis, I think we must face an uncomfortable truth. Either we are dealing with an elaborate hoax designed to frighten us, or... He paused. Or, Hastings prompted, or there is someone in this camp, someone we have not yet suspected, who knows far more about these events than they have revealed. Someone who has their own reasons for wanting us to believe in curses and ancient judgments. He turned to look at each person in turn. Sir Reginald, but still shaken by the discoveries in the hidden chamber. Miss Rhodes and Victoria clinging to each other. Lady Ashford, her earlier hysteria replaced by a cold, calculating expression. Timothy, his mask of boredom finally completely dropped. Professor Blackwood, whose eyes held secrets Poirot could not yet read. "One of you," Poirot said softly, "is not who they claim to be. One of you has orchestrated these events for a purpose I have not yet fully grasped. And unless we discover the truth soon, I fear Ahmed Hassan will not be the only victim of this expedition." As if in response to his words, the desert wind rose suddenly, whipping sand into their faces. And from somewhere deep within the pyramid came that sound again, the low, mournful moan that might have been wind through ancient chambers, or might have been something far more sinister. The curse of Khaemwaset was not finished with them yet. Chapter 7. The Second Death. That evening, the atmosphere in the camp was one of barely suppressed panic. Sir Reginald had ordered the hidden chamber sealed and placed under constant guard. The artifacts that had mysteriously appeared at the tomb entrance had been photographed and returned to the burial chamber, though their unexplained presence continued to disturb everyone. Poirot sat in his tent, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes closed in deep concentration. Hastings knew better than to interrupt when his friend was in this state. The little grey cells were working, assembling facts, discarding impossibilities, seeking the pattern that would make sense of the chaos. "Hastings," Poirot said suddenly, his eyes opening, "bring me the photographs that Dr. Pemberton took of the tomb seal. Also, I wish to see Sir Reginald's expedition diary and Miss Rhodes's official notes." Hastings hurried to comply, gathering the requested items from the main tent where they had been stored as evidence. When he returned, Poirot spread them out on his small camp table and began to examine them with his magnifying glass. "What are you looking for?" Hastings asked. "Something that has troubled me from the beginning, mon ami. Dr. Pemberton confessed to entering the tomb 2 nights before the official opening. Yes, he broke the seal, explored the tomb, found the library, and then resealed the entrance so cleverly that no one noticed." "Yes, that's what he said." "But observe these photographs, taken the morning we opened the tomb. You see the seal? The plaster? It is pristine, unbroken. The cracks that form when we break it, they are all fresh, all consistent with a seal that has remained intact for centuries." Hastings peered at the photographs. "I don't quite follow, Poirot. If Pemberton had broken and remade this seal, there would be subtle differences, variations in the plaster composition, slight discolorations, imperfect matches in the hieroglyphics, but I see none of these things, which means either Dr. Pemberton is a craftsman of impossible skill, or he lied about entering the tomb early," Hastings finished, understanding dawning. "Precisely. But why would he lie about this? He had already confessed to murder. What purpose would this additional deception serve?" Poirot's moustache quivered with agitation. Unless his entire confession was constructed to conceal something even more significant. Before Hastings could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Voices raised in alarm, someone shouting for Inspector Rashid, the sound of running feet. Poirot and Hastings rushed from their tent to find the camp in chaos. Workers were pointing toward Lady Ashford's tent, from which came the sound of Timothy Ashford's voice, calling desperately for help. Inspector Rashid reached the tent first, with Poirot close behind. What they found inside stopped them cold. Lady Margaret Ashford lay sprawled across her ornate camp bed, her eyes wide and staring, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Her right hand clutched at her throat, where livid bruises were already forming. On the small table beside her bed sat a glass of water and a bottle of sleeping powders. But what drew everyone's attention was the object placed carefully on Lady Ashford's chest, a small statue of Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of truth and justice, her ostrich feather perfectly balanced. Timothy knelt beside his aunt, his face ashen, his hands shaking. "I came to check on her," he said, his voice breaking. "She complained of a headache after dinner and retired early. I just wanted to make sure she was all right. But when I entered, she was like this, already dead." Inspector Rashid felt for a pulse, though the gesture was clearly futile. "She has been dead perhaps 20 minutes, no more. The body is still warm." Poirot examined the scene with meticulous care, touching nothing but observing everything. The tent showed no signs of struggle. Lady Ashford's jewelry box sat untouched on her dressing table. Her diary lay open beside the bed, "Inspector," Poirot said quietly, "the glass of water, it must be tested, and the sleeping powder bottle." Inspector Rashid carefully lifted the glass and sniffed it, then did the same with the bottle. His face darkened. "There is a bitter almond scent. Cyanide, if I am not mistaken." "Cyanide?" Timothy gasped. "But that means someone poisoned her." Sir Reginald, Victoria, Miss Rhodes, and Professor Blackwood had gathered at the tent entrance, their faces reflecting shock and horror. "This is madness," Sir Reginald exclaimed. "First Ahmed, now Lady Ashford. What is happening here?" Poirot held up a hand for silence. "Tell me, when did Lady Ashford retire to her tent?" "Shortly after dinner, say around 8 o'clock, Miss Rhodes answered. "She said she had a terrible headache and wanted to lie down." "And who saw her last?" There was a moment of uncomfortable silence. Then Victoria spoke hesitantly. "I did, Monsieur Poirot. I brought her some headache powders from the medical supplies about half an hour ago. She seemed agitated, distressed about something." "Did she say what troubled her?" Victoria shook her head. "No, but she kept looking at her diary as if debating something. She asked me to leave her alone, said she needed to think." Poirot moved to the bedside table and examined the open diary with his magnifying glass. The entry for today's date was brief, but revealing. "I can no longer remain silent. The guilt weighs too heavily. Tomorrow I shall tell Inspector Rashid what I know about the night Ahmed died. God forgive me for my cowardice until now." Poirot read the entry aloud, and a stunned silence fell over the tent. "She knew something," Inspector Rashid said grimly. "She witnessed something, or knew something about Ahmed's murder that she had not revealed, and someone killed her to ensure her silence." "But Dr. Pemberton is under guard," Timothy protested. "He couldn't have done this." "No," Poirot agreed. "Dr. Pemberton did not kill Lady Ashford, which leads us to a most disturbing conclusion. Either Dr. Pemberton had an accomplice, or—" He paused dramatically. "Or Dr. Pemberton did not kill Ahmed Hassan at all." The statement fell like a thunderbolt. "But he confessed," Sir Reginald exclaimed. "We all heard him." "He confessed to striking Ahmed Hassan and causing his death, yes. But consider, mes amis, a confession obtained under emotional duress after his other secrets had been exposed. A confession that contained certain inconsistencies which I noted at the time, but did not pursue because I believed we had our murderer." Poirot began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "But now Lady Ashford is dead, killed because of what she knew. What could she have known? What did she see the night Ahmed died?" He turned suddenly to Timothy. "Monsieur Ashford, you were with your aunt after we evacuated the tomb, were you not? You both returned to the main tent together?" Timothy nodded warily. "Yes, I told you that already." "And you remained together the entire time?" A flicker of something, hesitation, guilt, crossed Timothy's face. "Well, not the entire time. Aunt Margaret sent me to fetch her smelling salts from her tent. I was gone perhaps 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Poirot repeated thoughtfully. Long enough for her to witness something, perhaps? To see someone she shouldn't have seen, doing something they shouldn't have been doing? Professor Blackwood stepped forward, his expression troubled. Monsieur Poirot, are you suggesting that Lady Ashford saw the real killer, that she has been protecting them all this time? I am suggesting that Lady Ashford saw something that frightened her, something that she did not immediately understand the significance of. But as time passed and Dr. Pemberton was arrested, she began to realize what she had witnessed. And tonight, she decided to speak. For that decision, she paid with her life. Inspector Rashid examined the statue of Ma'at on the dead woman's chest. Why this? Why leave this particular goddess? Ma'at represents truth and justice, Professor Blackwood explained. The ancient Egyptians believed that when a person died, their heart was weighed against Ma'at's feather. If the heart was heavy with sin, it would be devoured by Ami, the devourer of souls. If it was light and pure, the deceased would pass into the afterlife. A message, then, Poirot said softly. The killer is presenting themselves as an instrument of justice, judging the guilty. Lady Ashford was being judged for her silence, her complicity through inaction. Miss Rhodes had gone very pale. Then we're all in danger. If the killer sees themselves as some kind of avenging angel, deciding who is guilty and who is innocent. Precisely, mademoiselle. Which is why we must discover the truth. And quickly. Poirot turned to Inspector Rashid. The camp must be secured. No one enters or leaves any tent without being observed. We shall gather everyone in the main tent, and I shall ask questions. Someone here knows more than they have revealed. As they prepared to leave Lady Ashford's tent, Poirot noticed something partially hidden beneath the bed, a small leather pouch. He retrieved it carefully and opened it. Inside were several British pound notes and a handwritten letter. Poirot scanned the letter quickly, and his expression grew grave. Inspector, you must see this. The letter was addressed to Lady Ashford and dated 3 weeks prior. My dearest Margaret, I write to inform you that I have made the arrangements we discussed. The artifact will be removed during the excavation and replaced with a replica so subtle that even experts will be fooled. Sir Reginald will never know the difference, and the genuine piece will command a fortune from our buyer in London. Your investment in this expedition will be repaid tenfold. However, I must insist on absolute discretion. If anyone suspects our arrangement, the consequences could be dire. Destroy this letter after reading. Your faithful servant in this endeavor. The letter was unsigned. Lady Ashford was planning to steal artifacts from the tomb, Inspector Rashid said, stunned. She had an accomplice in the expedition. Someone she trusted implicitly, Poirot added. Someone with the expertise to create convincing replicas and the access to execute the theft. His eyes swept over the assembled faces. Not someone in this very camp. Timothy had begun to weep, whether from grief for his aunt or from some other emotion, it was impossible to say. Victoria clutched her mother's hand tightly. Professor Blackwood's face was unreadable. Sir Reginald looked as if he might collapse at any moment. The web grows more complex, Poirot murmured. We have a murder disguised as an accident, a false confession, a plot to steal antiquities, and now a second murder disguised as divine judgment. Somewhere in this tangle lies the truth, and I fear we are running out of time to find it. He looked at the statue of Ma'at, with its feather of truth perfectly balanced. The question is not merely who killed Ahmed Hassan and Lady Ashford. The question is why. What secret is worth 2 lives? What truth is so dangerous that people must die to protect it? From outside came the sound that had become sickeningly familiar, the low moan from the pyramid, like the voice of the dead crying for justice. But this time Poirot's expression held something new, not confusion or concern, but the glimmer of understanding. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Hastings, he said quietly, tomorrow morning we shall visit Dr. Pemberton in his confinement. I have questions for him, questions that may finally illuminate the darkness. For I believe I am beginning to see the pattern. And if I am correct, he paused, his face troubled. If I am correct, we are dealing with something far more sinister than a simple murder for gain. What do you mean? Hastings asked. But Poirot merely shook his head. Tomorrow, mon ami. Tonight. So I must think. The little grey cells, they have much work to do. As the camp settled into an uneasy night, guards posted at every tent, Poirot sat alone, staring at the photographs and documents spread before him. Somewhere in these facts lay the answer. Somewhere in the lies and half-truths, the fear and greed, was a truth waiting to be uncovered. And tomorrow he would find it. Chapter 8. The Architect of Deception. The morning sun had barely risen when Poirot and Hastings made their way to the tent where Dr. Pemberton was being held under guard. Inspector Rashid accompanied them, his face drawn from a sleepless night spent securing the camp and investigating Lady Ashford's murder. Dr. Pemberton sat on a camp cot, his head in his hands. He looked up as they entered, and the change in him was startling. The ambitious young archaeologist had been replaced by a broken man, hollow-eyed and trembling. Monsieur Poirot, he said hoarsely, I heard about Lady Ashford. They're saying I had an accomplice, that I arranged her death somehow from confinement. But I swear to you, I had nothing to do with it. Poirot settled himself onto a folding chair with his customary precision. "That, Dr. Pemberton, is one of the few truthful statements you have made since this affair began." Pemberton's head jerked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Poirot said calmly, "that your confession to the murder of Ahmed Hassan was false. You did not kill him." The silence that followed was absolute. Inspector Rashid stared at Poirot in astonishment. Hastings' mouth fell open, and Dr. Pemberton's face went through a remarkable transformation: shock, relief, fear, and then finally, something like despair. "How did you know?" he whispered. "The little grey cells, they observed many inconsistencies, but it was the seal of the tomb that finally convinced me. You claim to have broken it 2 nights before the official opening, to have entered, explored, and then resealed it so perfectly that no one would notice. But this, it is impossible. The photographs show a seal that had remained intact for millennia. No modern craftsman, however skilled, could replicate ancient plaster with such perfection." Poirot leaned forward. "So, I asked myself, why would a man who has already confessed to murder add an unnecessary lie? And the answer, it came to me. You lied about entering the tomb early because you needed to explain how you knew about the library, about the scrolls. But in truth, or you learned of these things some other way." Pemberton's hands clenched into fists. "I couldn't tell you the truth. I was protecting—" He stopped abruptly. "Protecting whom?" Poirot asked gently. "Who told you about the library, Dr. Pemberton? Who shared with you the secrets of Khaemwaset's tomb?" After a long moment, Pemberton spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Professor Blackwood." Inspector Rashid started forward. "Blackwood? But he was not even part of the expedition until yesterday." "That is what he wanted everyone to believe," Pemberton said bitterly. "But Professor Blackwood and I have been corresponding for months. He knew about the library. He had researched the legends of Khaemwaset for years. He contacted me shortly after Sir Reginald announced this expedition, offered to share his knowledge in exchange for—" He trailed off. "In exchange for what?" Poirot prompted. "For certain artifacts from the tomb, small pieces that wouldn't be missed in the official inventory. Blackwood had buyers lined up, collectors who would pay fortunes for genuine ancient Egyptian treasures with no provenance questions asked." "So it was Blackwood, not Lady Ashford, who planned to steal from the tomb?" Inspector Rashid said. "Both of them," Pemberton corrected. "They were working together. Blackwood approached Lady Ashford months ago. She was financing the expedition, so she had leverage. They formed a partnership. Blackwood would identify the most valuable portable pieces, Lady Ashford would ensure they disappeared from the official records, and I would be their inside man on making the actual substitutions." Poirot nodded slowly. "And in return, you would receive funding for your own expeditions, your own pursuit of Imhotep's tomb, the respectability and recognition you craved." "Yes," Pemberton said miserably. "I know it was wrong, but I was tired of being overlooked, tired of Sir Reginald taking credit for my work. Blackwood promised me that with the money from these sales, I could finance my own dig, make my own discoveries. I would finally step out of Sir Reginald's shadow. But then Ahmed Hassan discovered what you were doing," Poirot said. Pemberton shook his head violently. "No, that's just it. Ahmed didn't discover our theft scheme. He discovered something else entirely, something in the tomb that I still don't fully understand. 2 days ago, after we first started clearing the entrance, Sir Ahmed came to me privately. He was agitated, said he had seen something in the preliminary excavations, something that troubled him greatly." "What did he see?" "He wouldn't tell me. He said he needed to be certain before he spoke to Sir Reginald, but he did say one thing that I remember clearly. He said, 'The prince's tomb, it has been disturbed before, not by ancient robbers, but by modern hands. And recently.'" Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Modern hands? What did he mean?" "I don't know. I thought he was mistaken, or perhaps he'd found evidence of tomb robbers from the last century. But then, the night before we opened the tomb, Ahmed came to me again. He was frightened this time, said he had confirmed his suspicions. He had found proof that someone had been entering and leaving the tomb for weeks, and perhaps months." "And you told this to Professor Blackwood?" Poirot said. Pemberton nodded shamefacedly. I had to. I thought Ahmed might have discovered our plan to steal artifacts. Blackwood said he would handle it, said he would speak to Ahmed, explained that we meant no disrespect to the tomb. But the next morning, Ahmed was dead. And you believed Blackwood had killed him. I didn't know what to believe. When you began your investigation, when you found the scroll fragments in Ahmed's hand, I panicked. Blackwood told me that if anyone discovered our connection, we would both hang for murder. He said the only way to protect myself was to confess to accidentally killing Ahmed during a struggle, claim it was about the scrolls and my academic ambition. He said the courts might be lenient if I showed remorse. They claimed it was an accident. So you confessed to a murder you did not commit, to protect yourself and Professor Blackwood from suspicion of the murder he did commit, Poirot summarized. I thought so, yes. But now Lady Ashford is dead, and I realize Blackwood isn't just a thief. He's something far more dangerous. Inspector Rashid had been growing increasingly agitated during this conversation. We must arrest Blackwood immediately. Where is he now? One of the guards spoke up from the tent entrance. Professor Blackwood left the camp before dawn, sir. He said he was going to examine some geological formations near the pyramids. He took his walking stick and a canvas bag. Poirot stood abruptly, his usual calm replaced by urgency. We must find him at once. Hastings, Inspector, come with me. Bring your revolver, Inspector. I fear Professor Blackwood is more dangerous than we imagined. As they hurried from the tent, Pemberton called out, Monsieur Poirot, there's something else you should know. Yesterday, when we discovered the hidden library, Blackwood's reaction, he wasn't surprised. He already knew it was there. And when he read that scroll about Khaemwaset's confession, the one about the wronged wife and the disputed succession... Yes. Poirot turned back. He smiled. Just for a moment, but I saw it, as if that scroll confirmed something he'd been hoping to find. Poirot and Hastings exchanged glances. Most illuminating, Poirot murmured. Most illuminating indeed. They found Sir Reginald, Victoria, Miss Rhodes, and Timothy gathered in the main tent, having breakfast in subdued silence. When Poirot explained that Professor Blackwood was now the prime suspect and had left camp, Sir Reginald's face flushed with anger. Blackwood, I should have known. The man has been obsessed with Egyptian curses for years, written dozens of crackpot papers about ancient vengeance and divine justice. The archaeological community considers him a laughingstock. And yet, Poirot observed, he knew precisely where to find this expedition, precisely how to insinuate himself into your confidence. Tell me, Sir Reginald, when did Professor Blackwood first appear? Yesterday afternoon, just after Ahmed's body was discovered. He claimed he'd been following our progress from a distance, that he'd come to warn us about the curse. Most convenient timing, Poirot said dryly. He arrives exactly when needed to cast suspicion on supernatural causes, and to deflect attention from mundane murder. Miss Rhodes spoke up hesitantly. Monsieur Poirot, there's something that's been troubling me. When we were in the hidden library yesterday, Professor Blackwood translated that scroll, the one about Prince Khaemwaset's guilt and the wronged wife, but he translated it very quickly, as if he already knew what it said. Because he did know, Poirot said. Just as Dr. Pemberton suspected, Blackwood has been in that tomb before, many times. The question is, how? How did he gain access to a sealed tomb that had remained undisturbed for 3,000 years? Timothy Ashford, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. There might be another entrance. When I was exploring the base of the pyramid yesterday, before all this horror began, I noticed something odd. There's a section of stones on the north face that don't quite match the others. Different weathering pattern, slightly different color. Poirot's moustache quivered with excitement. Show me. Show me at once. They assembled quickly. Poirot, Hastings, Inspector Rashid, and 4 of his men, Sir Reginald and Timothy. As they approached the Great Pyramid, Timothy led them to the location he had mentioned. Indeed, there was a section of the pyramid's base, partially hidden by accumulated sand and debris, where the stones appeared subtly different. Inspector Rashid's men began clearing away the sand, and within minutes, they had uncovered what appeared to be a modern construction, stones that had been carefully removed and replaced, creating a hidden entrance. This is impossible, Sir Reginald breathed. to modify the pyramid itself, and to create a secret passage, the engineering knowledge required, the sheer audacity. Professor Blackwood is many things, Poirot said grimly, but he is not lacking in audacity. They cleared the entrance and peered into the darkness beyond. A narrow tunnel, clearly of modern construction but cleverly disguised, descended into the earth. The walls were shored up with wooden beams and electric cables ran along the ceiling. "He's been working here for months," Inspector Rashid said in amazement. "Perhaps years, creating his own private access to the tomb." "But why?" Hastings asked. "If he could enter and leave at will, why involve himself with the official expedition at all? Why risk exposure?" "Because," Poirot said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes, the official expedition provided the perfect cover for something he had already accomplished. And because there was something in that tomb he needed others to witness, to authenticate, to make official. Something that would not have value or credibility if he alone claimed to have found it. He turned to Sir Reginald. "The scrolls in the library, the ones about disputed succession, about the wronged wife and the legitimate heir, what would such documents be worth to the right person?" Sir Reginald frowned. "Historically, priceless, they would rewrite our understanding of the 19th Dynasty. But in monetary terms," he paused, "there are collectors who would pay millions for authenticated documents that could challenge established royal lineages, especially if those documents could somehow be used to support modern claims to—" Ansi, his eyes widened. "Dear God." "Precisely," Poirot said. "Professor Blackwood has not been stealing artifacts to sell to collectors. He has been searching for something specific, something that would give him, or someone he represents, legitimacy for a claim. Perhaps a claim to Egyptian heritage, to royal lineage, to rights over antiquities currently held in museums." "But that's madness," Timothy exclaimed. "Even with ancient documents, no one could seriously claim—" "In Egypt today, Monsieur Ashford, there are those who seek to reclaim their heritage, to challenge the foreign ownership of their country's treasures. A document proving legitimate descent from ancient royalty, authenticated by reputable archaeologists like Sir Reginald, could be a powerful political and legal tool." Inspector Rashid's face had gone very serious. "Monsieur Poirot, if what you suggest is true, this is no longer merely a matter of murder. This is a conspiracy with international implications. Indeed, which makes Professor Blackwood far more dangerous than a simple thief or even a murderer. He is a man with a cause, a mission, and such men will stop at nothing to achieve their goals." A shout from one of the constables interrupted them. The man was pointing toward the desert, where a figure could be seen approaching rapidly, one of the camp workers running full tilt across the sand. When the man reached them, he could barely speak for breathlessness. Inspector Rashid gave him water and waited for him to recover. "The tomb," the worker finally gasped out in Arabic. "The sealed entrance to Prince Khaemwaset's tomb. Someone has broken through the barrier we placed yesterday. Only there are sounds from inside. Someone is in there now, in the burial chamber." They ran, a ragged group racing across the sand toward the tomb entrance. As they approached, they could indeed see that the wooden barrier, erected to protect the partially collapsed entrance, had been torn aside. Fresh footprints led into the darkness. And from within came sounds, the scrape of stone on stone, and a voice, speaking in English, reciting something that sounded like a prayer or incantation. Professor Blackwood's voice. Poirot held up his hand, signaling caution. "Inspector, your men should surround the entrance but not enter yet. Blackwood is desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." But even as he spoke, the sounds from within changed. The scraping stopped. There was a moment of utter silence. Then Professor Blackwood's voice rang out, so clear and triumphant. "I have found it! After all these years, I have found the proof. Come, Sir Reginald, come and see, come and bear witness to the greatest discovery in archaeological history." Against Poirot's advice, Sir Reginald started toward the entrance. "If there's a genuine discovery, it is a trap," Poirot said urgently. "Sir Reginald, I beg you to wait." But Sir Reginald was already descending into the tomb, drawn by the lure of discovery that had governed his entire life. With a curse, Inspector Rashid followed, his revolver drawn. Poirot and Hastings had no choice but to follow as well. They made their way down the familiar passage, their torches casting dancing shadows on the painted walls. The burial chamber, when they reached it, was exactly as they had left it, except for one crucial detail. The sarcophagus of Prince Khaemwaset had been opened. The massive granite lid, which should have required a dozen men to move, had been pushed aside. And standing beside the open sarcophagus, holding an electric torch that illuminated his face from below like a theatrical villain, was Professor Edmund Blackwood. In his hands, he held a golden crown, ancient, beautiful, and unmistakably royal. "Behold," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber, "the crown of Khaemwaset, first son of Rameses the Great, rightful heir to the throne of Egypt. For 3,000 years it has waited here, proof of the greatest injustice in Egyptian history. And now it shall be restored to its rightful place." "Professor Blackwood," Inspector Rashid said, his revolver trained on the man, "so you are under arrest for the murders of Ahmed Hassan and Lady Margaret Ashford. Put down the crown and step away from the sarcophagus." Blackwood laughed, a wild, unhinged sound that made Hastings's blood run cold. "Murder? No, Inspector. Justice. They died because they stood in the way of truth. Ahmed discovered my work here, threatened to expose me before I could complete my research, and Lady Ashford, greedy, grasping Lady Ashford, she tried to blackmail me when she realized what I was truly searching for. They had to die, just as anyone who tries to stop me now will have to die." His hand moved to his pocket, and suddenly he held a revolver of his own, pointed directly at Sir Reginald. "Now then, Sir Reginald Carstairs, you are going to authenticate this crown. You are going to declare it genuine. So write it in your official expedition records and present it to the Egyptian authorities as proof of Khaemwaset's legitimate claim to the throne, and through him, proof of the legitimate lineage of those who descend from his bloodline." "You're mad," Sir Reginald said, though his voice shook. "Even if the crown is genuine, it proves nothing about modern descendants." "Oh, but it does," Blackwood said softly. "Combined with the scrolls in the library, with proper DNA analysis of the remains in this sarcophagus, with the documentation I have spent years assembling, it proves everything. And you, Sir Reginald, will help me prove it. Or I will kill you and everyone else in this tomb, and the world will believe the curse of Khaemwaset claimed you all." The standoff was absolute. Inspector Rashid had his gun trained on Blackwood. Blackwood had his gun pointed at Sir Reginald. No one dared move. Until Hercule Poirot stepped forward, his hands raised peacefully. "Professor Blackwood," he said calmly, "before you do anything irreversible, I must tell you, the crown you hold is a fake." Chapter 9. The Weight of Truth. Professor Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "A fake? How dare you? I have studied Egyptian archaeology for 30 years. I know a genuine artifact when I see one." Poirot remained perfectly calm, his hands still raised in a gesture of peace. "And yet, Professor, you are holding a forgery. A very clever one, I grant you, but a forgery nonetheless. I know this because I have spent the last hour examining the photographs Dr. Pemberton took of the sarcophagus yesterday, before you moved it. And I observed something most interesting." He gestured toward the now open sarcophagus. "The lid, it bears the cartouche of Prince Khaemwaset, yes? But look closely at the hieroglyphs around the edge. You see? There is a small variation in the carving style. Some symbols are deeper, more precisely cut than others, as if they were added later by a different hand." Sir Reginald, despite the gun pointed at him, couldn't help but look. His eyes widened. "By God, Poirot is right. The cartouche has been altered. This isn't Khaemwaset's original sarcophagus at all. Or rather, it was repurposed, the inscriptions modified." "Precisely," Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This tomb, it was constructed in the 19th Dynasty, yes. But the sarcophagus, it dates from an earlier period. Someone in ancient times took an older sarcophagus and modified it to appear as if it belonged to Khaemwaset. The real question is, why?" Blackwood's hand trembled, his gun wavering. "You're lying. You're trying to trick me." "Am I?" "Then explain, Professor, why the golden crown you hold so reverently shows no signs of tarnish despite 3,000 years in a sealed tomb. Explain why the underside of the crown, which I can see from here, bears the mark of a London goldsmith. A small stamp, barely visible, but unmistakable to one who knows where to look. Blackwood turned the crown over, and his face went deathly pale. There, on the inner band, was indeed a tiny mark. The hallmark of a British craftsman, no more than 50 years old. The crown slipped from his fingers, clattering on the stone floor. "No," he whispered. "No, and this is impossible. I found the tomb, I opened the sarcophagus myself, the crown was there, it was placed there for you to find," Poirot said gently. "Just as the scrolls in the library were placed there. Just as this entire tomb was prepared, staged, for someone with your particular obsession to discover." Inspector Rashid lowered his revolver slightly, though he kept it trained on Blackwood. "Monsieur Poirot, what are you saying?" "I am saying that Professor Blackwood is not the architect of this deception. He is its victim." Poirot looked at the trembling man with something like pity. "Someone wanted you to find this tomb, Professor. Someone spent years, perhaps decades, preparing it. The secret entrance you created. You did not create it, you merely rediscovered it. Someone else built it long ago. Someone with resources and knowledge far beyond a simple academic." Blackwood sank down onto the edge of the sarcophagus, his gun forgotten in his lap. "But who? Why would anyone go to such lengths?" "For the same reason anyone commits an elaborate fraud," Poirot replied. "For money, power, and revenge. But to understand the truth, we must return to the beginning. We must ask ourselves, what is this tomb really?" He began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "When I first heard of this expedition, something troubled me. Sir Reginald, you are one of the most respected Egyptologists in the world, yes? You have excavated dozens of sites. What made you so certain that the tomb of Khaemwaset would be here, in Giza, when historical records suggest he was buried near Memphis?" Sir Reginald frowned. "I received information from a reliable source. An anonymous benefactor sent me photographs and documents suggesting the location. The evidence was compelling. References in obscure texts, geological surveys showing anomalies beneath the sand. Lady Ashford verified the authenticity and agreed to finance the expedition." "An anonymous benefactor," Poirot repeated. "How very convenient. And Lady Ashford, she too received information, did she not? Information about the potential for valuable artifacts, about opportunities for profit?" "How did you know?" Timothy Ashford asked, startled. "Because," Poirot said, "the letter we found in her tent, the one about stealing artifacts and creating forgeries, it was not a recent communication. It was part of the original plan that drew her to finance this expedition. Someone promised her enormous profits, and convinced her that Sir Reginald's reputation would authenticate the discoveries and that together they could make millions." He turned to Professor Blackwood. "And you, Professor, you received information too, did you not? Anonymous tips about the library of Khaemwaset, about scrolls that would prove your theories about disputed succession and legitimate lineages?" Blackwood nodded slowly, like a man waking from a dream. "Letters arrived at my university over the course of 2 years. They contained fragments of information, clues that led me here. I thought I was uncovering the truth through my own brilliance." "But you were being led, like a fish on a hook. All of you were." Poirot's voice grew somber. "Someone orchestrated this entire expedition, manipulated each person involved, for a purpose we have not yet fully understood, and that someone is willing to commit murder to ensure their plan succeeds." Hastings spoke up hesitantly. "But Poirot, if Blackwood didn't kill Ahmed and Lady Ashford, who did?" "Ah, mon ami, that is the question that leads us to the heart of this mystery. Let us consider the facts. Ahmed Hassan discovered that the tomb had been disturbed by modern hands. What did he mean? He meant that someone had been accessing this tomb regularly, not just Professor Blackwood through his secret entrance, but someone with official access, someone who could come and go without suspicion." Sir Reginald's face had gone white. "Are you suggesting someone on my team has been—" "I am suggesting," Poirot interrupted, "that someone has been using your expedition as cover for a much larger scheme. Someone who knew about Blackwood's obsession and Lady Ashford's greed. Someone who arranged for them all to be here at the same time, to be caught in a web so complex that, when murders occurred, there would be multiple suspects, multiple motives, confusion, and chaos. Inspector Rashid was nodding slowly. A master criminal manipulating everyone like pieces on a chessboard. Precisely, and what is the goal of this manipulation? Not merely to steal artifacts or create fraudulent provenance for fake antiquities. No, this is something far more ambitious. Poirot's eyes swept over the burial chamber. This entire tomb is a forgery, but a forgery created for a specific purpose. The scrolls about disputed succession, the crown, the documents, all of it designed to create a legal and historical basis for a claim. But a claim to what? A new voice spoke from the entrance to the chamber, cold and amused. To everything, Monsieur Poirot. To ownership of every Egyptian artifact currently held in British museums, to legal authority over all future excavations, to billions of pounds in cultural patrimony. They whirled around to see a figure standing at the entrance, not the figure Poirot had expected, but one that made terrible sense nonetheless. It was Miss Evelyn Rhodes, but she no longer looked like the mousy, oppressed secretary. She stood tall, her earlier civility replaced by commanding presence. In her hand was a revolver, pointed steadily at the group. And behind her, blocking the only exit, stood 3 men in dark clothing, professional criminals by the look of them. "Evelyn?" Sir Reginald gasped. "What is the meaning of this?" She laughed, as a sound entirely unlike her earlier timid voice. "Evelyn Rhodes is a fiction, Reginald. A role I've played for 5 years. My real name is Evelyn Carstairs Blackwood. And yes, before you ask, I am indeed Professor Blackwood's daughter." Professor Blackwood stared at her in shock. "Daughter? But I have no—" He stopped, his face draining of color. "Sarah? Sarah? Is that you?" "Not Sarah anymore. I left that name behind 20 years ago when you abandoned my mother and me for your obsession with ancient Egypt, when you chose dusty tombs over your own family." Her voice was bitter. "But I learned from you, Father. I learned to value knowledge, to plan meticulously, to think in terms of decades rather than days." Poirot's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. "You orchestrated all of this. The anonymous letters to your father. Aren't the information fed to Lady Ashford, the manipulation of Sir Reginald's expedition?" "All of it," she confirmed proudly. "It took years to prepare. I created the secret entrance to this tomb, not my father. He merely found it where I meant him to. I forged the scrolls and planted them in the library. I arranged for Sir Reginald to discover this tomb at precisely the right moment." "But why?" Victoria cried out. "If you're my half-sister, why would you—" "Because I wanted what you had." Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. "You were raised as Sir Reginald's acknowledged daughter, given every advantage while I was cast aside. But more than that, I wanted justice. The British Empire stole Egypt's treasures, claimed ownership of a culture that isn't theirs. Hence, I'm going to use their own laws against them." She gestured to the artifacts around them. "With these discoveries, authenticated by Sir Reginald Carstairs and witnessed by multiple sources, I can claim direct descent from Prince Khaemwaset. The scrolls prove my lineage. The DNA from the sarcophagus, which does contain ancient remains, carefully selected for genetic markers, will support the claim. And with that claim comes legal standing to demand repatriation of thousands of artifacts or monetary compensation worth billions." "But it's all fake," Sir Reginald protested. "The moment anyone examines the crown, the scrolls—" "By the time anyone examines them closely, it won't matter. The claim will have been filed, the publicity generated, the political pressure applied. Egypt's government will support the claim. I've already made arrangements with certain officials who are eager to reclaim their heritage. Whether the artifacts are genuine or not becomes irrelevant in the face of political and public opinion." Poirot shook his head slowly. "But you made one critical error, mademoiselle. You allowed your emotions to override your careful planning. Ahmed Hassan had to die not because he discovered your forgery, but because he was loyal to Sir Reginald and would have protected him from your scheme. And Lady Ashford died because she realized you were manipulating her, using her greed to serve your own ends." "They were obstacles," Evelyn said coldly. "Nothing more. And you killed them without hesitation, without remorse." Poirot's voice was sad. "Ahmed Hassan. Who showed you kindness when you pretended to be the downtrodden secretary? Lady Ashford, who trusted you. How did you do it, mademoiselle? How did you poison Lady Ashford when you were supposedly at the tomb entrance with Victoria? A slight smile crossed Evelyn's face. So clever, Monsieur Poirot. You've almost worked it out. The cyanide was in the sleeping powder bottle, not added to her water. I switched the bottles earlier in the day. When she took her headache powder, she sealed her own fate. As for Ahmed, she shrugged. I followed him from the camp after Pemberton stupidly mentioned Ahmed's suspicions to my father. I struck him from behind with a rock, broke his neck to ensure death, and arranged his body to suggest an accidental fall. Simple. Efficient. And the artifacts you placed at the tomb entrance? Inspector Rashid asked. The message in the sand? Theater. I needed to maintain the curse narrative, keep everyone frightened and confused. The costume of Anubis, the mysterious sounds, all designed to cloud judgment, to make rational people believe in supernatural causes. Professor Blackwood had been listening with growing horror. Sarah, this is madness. Murder, fraud on an international scale. You'll be caught, prosecuted. Will I? She looked at him with pity. You still don't understand, do you, father? Everyone in this room except Monsieur Poirot and his friends has committed crimes. Sir Reginald falsified his marriage, abandoned his wife and child. You plotted to steal artifacts, confessed to murder to protect yourself. Dr. Pemberton was your accomplice. Lady Ashford conspired to commit fraud. Who will believe any of you when you tell such an incredible story? I, on the other hand, am the victim, the faithful secretary, the devoted daughter, the wronged woman seeking justice. She gestured with her gun toward the exit. My associates will ensure you all reach Cairo safely, where certain police officials, who are sympathetic to Egypt's cultural reclamation efforts, will take your statements. By tomorrow, the story of Prince Khaemwaset's tomb and its remarkable discoveries will be in every newspaper in the world, and I will be celebrated as the woman who helped restore Egypt's lost heritage. Poirot had remained remarkably calm throughout this revelation. Now he spoke, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. An excellent plan, mademoiselle. Truly, you have thought of almost everything, say except for one small detail. And what is that? You assumed that everyone in this chamber has been fooled by your elaborate deception. But there is one person who has understood the truth from the very beginning, who has been working secretly to expose your scheme. One person who has been gathering evidence, taking photographs, documenting every lie and forgery. Evelyn's confident expression faltered slightly. What are you talking about? Poirot turned to Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald, please tell Mademoiselle Evelyn about the letter you received 3 weeks ago, the anonymous letter warning you that your expedition had been compromised. Sir Reginald looked confused. I received no such letter. Ah, but you did. It simply never reached you because someone intercepted it. Poirot's gaze shifted. Someone who has been watching, waiting, protecting. Someone we have all overlooked because we assumed she was exactly what she appeared to be. Is that not correct? Victoria? All eyes turned to Victoria Carstairs, who had been standing quietly throughout the entire confrontation. Slowly, she smiled, a smile remarkably similar to Poirot's own expression of satisfaction. Well done, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice no longer trembling but steady and clear. I had hoped you would work it out eventually. Chapter 10. The Final Judgment. The silence in the burial chamber was absolute. Even Evelyn Rhodes stood frozen, her gun wavering as she stared at Victoria in shock. Victoria, she whispered, but you're just a naive young woman who knows nothing of the world? Victoria finished, her voice sharp. That's what you thought, wasn't it? That's what father thought too. Poor, sheltered Victoria, raised without a mother, protected from life's harsh realities. She laughed bitterly. How convenient for both of you. Sir Reginald looked stricken. Victoria, what are you saying? I'm saying, father, that I've known the truth about my mother for 3 years. Not 5 days, as everyone believes. 3 years. She pulled a worn envelope from her jacket pocket. I found letters in your study. Correspondence between you and the woman you thought was your secretary. I learned that my mother hadn't died in childbirth, but had been cast aside, paid to remain silent, reduced to serving the man who had abandoned her. Miss Rhodes, the true Evelyn Rhodes, had tears streaming down her face. "Victoria, I wanted to tell you so many times." "I know, Mother. I know." Victoria's voice softened momentarily. "And I understand why you couldn't. But 3 years ago, when I discovered the truth, I also discovered something else. I found evidence that someone was manipulating Father's research, feeding him false information, guiding his work toward this supposed tomb of Khaemwaset. I didn't understand the purpose then, but I knew it was dangerous." Poirot nodded approvingly. "And so you began your own investigation, non? Quietly, without telling anyone, you started to uncover the conspiracy." "Yes. I studied archaeology in secret, learned to recognize genuine artifacts from forgeries. I hired a private investigator to trace the anonymous letters Father received. The trail led to a woman calling herself Sarah Blackwood. Professor Blackwood's estranged daughter, a woman with a degree in chemistry, our expertise in ancient Egyptian art, and a consuming hatred for both her father and mine." She looked directly at Evelyn Carstairs Blackwood. "You thought you were so clever, inserting yourself into our lives as a meek secretary, but I noticed small things. The way you moved when you thought no one was watching, with confidence, not timidity. Your calloused fingers from years of archaeological work, not typing. The way you looked at Father sometimes, not with the devotion of an employee, but with the calculating gaze of someone planning his destruction." "You knew," Evelyn breathed. "All this time, you knew who I was?" "Not immediately. It took me 2 years to piece it together. But once I understood your true identity, I started documenting everything. On every forged scroll you planted in the library, I photographed them with a camera hidden in my journal. Every artifact you modified, I recorded the alterations. Every conversation you manipulated, I noted in code in my diary." Victoria produced a leather-bound notebook from inside her jacket, holding it up like evidence in a trial. "Everything is here. Dates, times, photographic evidence, including photographs of you entering the tomb through the secret passage weeks before the official excavation began." Inspector Rashid found his voice. "Miss Carstairs, why did you not report this to the authorities?" "Because I needed proof of the entire conspiracy, not just fragments. If I'd reported early, Evelyn would have disappeared, and we'd never have uncovered the full extent of her plan. I needed her to believe she had succeeded, or to reveal herself completely." Victoria's gaze hardened. "And I needed to see if my father would finally choose to do the right thing, or if his ambition would blind him once again." Sir Reginald sank down onto a stone ledge, his face ashen. "You were testing me? Your own father?" "A father who abandoned my mother, who lied to me my entire life. Yes, I was testing you." Victoria's voice broke slightly. "And when you opened this tomb despite the warnings, when you pursued glory over truth, you failed that test." Hastings, who had been trying to follow the increasingly complex revelations, spoke up. "But Miss Carstairs, if you knew about Evelyn's plan, why didn't you prevent Ahmed Hassan's murder? Or Lady Ashford's?" Victoria's face contorted with grief. "I didn't know she would kill them. I thought she only intended fraud, not murder. Ahmed came to me the night before he died. He said he'd discovered something strange in the tomb, wanted my advice. I told him to wait, to let me investigate first. I thought I could protect him." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Instead, I sent him to his death." "And Lady Ashford?" Poirot asked gently. "I discovered too late that she'd been recruited into the scheme. By the time I understood she was in danger, she was already dead. Those deaths are on my conscience, Monsieur Poirot. They will haunt me forever." Evelyn laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "How touching. But your little evidence collection means nothing. You're still just a young woman with a notebook full of claims. Who will believe you?" "I will," came a new voice from the passage entrance. When everyone turned to see a distinguished Egyptian man in his 50s entering the chamber, accompanied by several officials in uniform. He wore the insignia of high government office. "Minister Khalil," Sir Reginald gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited, Sir Reginald. 3 days ago, I received a telegram from Miss Victoria Carstairs detailing a conspiracy to defraud the Egyptian government and desecrate one of our ancient sites. She provided enough evidence to warrant my personal investigation. The minister's gaze swept over the scene with evident distaste. It appears I arrived just in time. Victoria nodded to him respectfully. Thank you for coming, Minister. As you can see, the situation is exactly as I described. Evelyn's gun hand trembled. Her 3 accomplices looked uncertainly at the government officials, on clearly calculating their chances of escape. But Inspector Rashid's men had already moved to block all exits. It's over, mademoiselle, Poirot said quietly. You have been, as the English say, outmaneuvered. Put down the weapon. For a long moment, Evelyn stood frozen, her face cycling through emotions, rage, despair, and finally resignation. Slowly, she lowered her gun. I did it for Egypt, she said, her voice hollow. Everything I did was to reclaim what was stolen from this country. No, Minister Khalil said firmly. You did it for revenge and profit. Egypt does not need false heroes creating fraudulent claims. We need truth, legitimate scholarship, and cooperation with international partners to preserve and study our heritage properly. He gestured to the uniformed officials. Evelyn Carstairs Blackwood, you are under arrest for the murders of Ahmed Hassan and Margaret Ashford, conspiracy to commit fraud, and desecration of protected archaeological sites. Your accomplices will also be taken into custody. As the officials moved to handcuff Evelyn and her men, Professor Blackwood stepped forward. Sarah, daughter, I am so sorry. For abandoning you, for choosing my obsession over my family, I failed you as a father. Evelyn looked at him with eyes full of pain. You failed me long before any of this, father, and now we'll both pay the price for our choices. She was led away, her head high, despite the handcuffs, still clinging to some fragment of dignity. Inspector Rashid turned to Dr. Pemberton, who had been brought down to the chamber during the confrontation. Dr. Pemberton, too, you will also face charges for your role in the conspiracy to steal artifacts, though your false confession and cooperation may be considered in your sentencing. Pemberton nodded miserably. I understand. I deserve whatever punishment I receive. Minister Khalil addressed Sir Reginald next. Sir Reginald Carstairs, your role in this matter is complicated. You were manipulated, yes, but you also showed poor judgment in your treatment of your wife and in your haste to claim discoveries without proper verification. Your permits for future excavations in Egypt will be reviewed. Sir Reginald stood and faced the minister with what remained of his dignity. I understand, Minister, and I accept full responsibility for my actions. But I must ask... He turned to Miss Rhodes and Victoria. Can you ever forgive me? Oh, either of you? Miss Rhodes looked at the man she had loved and married so many years ago. I don't know, Reginald. You gave me 25 years of silence and shame. Forgiveness. That will take time. Victoria said nothing, her face unreadable. Poirot stepped forward, his manner brisk and businesslike. Now then, Minister Khalil, there remains the question of this tomb itself. It is clearly a modern forgery, but the construction is impressive, and it does sit upon an ancient foundation. What will become of it? Minister Khalil surveyed the chamber thoughtfully. The tomb will be dismantled carefully, documented as an example of archaeological fraud. The genuine ancient portions will be studied properly, and the site will be marked as a reminder that the pursuit of glory and revenge corrupts, but the pursuit of truth elevates. He turned to Victoria with genuine respect. Miss Carstairs, on behalf of the Egyptian government, I thank you for your courage and integrity. You uncovered a conspiracy that could have damaged legitimate archaeological research for years to come. If you wish to continue your studies in Egyptology, I would be honored to sponsor your education at the Cairo Museum. Victoria managed a small smile. Thank you, Minister. I would like that very much. As the officials began the process of securing the scene and removing the prisoners, Poirot found himself standing with Hastings near the entrance to the chamber, looking out at the desert beyond. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, that was certainly one of your more complex cases. I confess I didn't see the truth about Miss Carstairs until you pointed it out. Few did, mon ami. She played her role to perfection. The innocent young woman, overwhelmed by events. But there were signs for those who knew where to look. The way she observed everything so carefully, as if documenting rather than simply experiencing. Her questions, which seemed naive but were actually quite astute, and most tellingly, her lack of genuine surprise when her mother's identity was revealed. She acted shocked, but her eyes, they told a different story. And the mysterious artifacts that appeared at the tomb entrance? The figure in the Anubis costume that Victoria and Miss Rhodes claimed to see? Poirot smiled. Ah, that was Victoria's own theatrical touch, I suspect. When she needed to maintain the curse narrative to keep Evelyn confident, to encourage her to reveal herself fully. The figure in the costume was likely a trusted ally, perhaps the same private investigator she hired to trace the anonymous letters. Brilliant, Hastings murmured. But Poirot, there's one thing I still don't understand. When did you realize the truth about Victoria? The moment we discovered Lady Ashford's body and read the diary entry about her intention to speak to Inspector Rashid, I asked myself, who would have access to Lady Ashford's tent? Who could have switched the sleeping powder bottles without suspicion? The answer was anyone in the camp. But then, I asked, who would have known that Lady Ashford possessed dangerous knowledge? And the answer to that was more limited. Poirot's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. Victoria brought Lady Ashford the headache powders. She admitted this freely. But she was the last person to see Lady Ashford alive. She had the opportunity to read the diary, to understand that Lady Ashford was about to expose Evelyn. In that moment, I realized Victoria had been several steps ahead of us all along. But she didn't prevent the murder, Hastings pointed out. No, and that weighs heavily upon her conscience, as it should. Victoria calculated that Lady Ashford's death would force Evelyn to reveal herself completely, and she was correct. But it was a cold calculation, one that cost an innocent woman her life. Poirot's expression was somber. In her pursuit of justice against Evelyn, Aunt Victoria became somewhat like her, willing to sacrifice others to achieve her goals. That is the tragedy of this case, Hastings. In fighting monsters, one must take care not to become a monster oneself. They stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the moral complexities of the case. Timothy Ashford approached them, his usual sardonic manner subdued. Monsieur Poirot, I wanted to thank you. My aunt was far from perfect, but she didn't deserve to die like that. You brought her killer to justice. It was not I alone, Monsieur Ashford. It was the careful work of a young woman who understood that truth, however painful, must be pursued. Timothy nodded. I suppose I'll inherit Aunt Margaret's estate now. Rather a hollow victory, given the circumstances. He paused. Do you think she really intended to speak to Inspector Rashid? Or was that diary entry itself a manipulation, meant to be found after her death? Poirot considered this. An interesting question. We shall never know for certain. But I believe Lady Ashford was genuinely troubled by her conscience in those final hours. Perhaps in death, she achieved a redemption she could not achieve in life. As the sun began to set over the desert, casting the pyramids in shades of gold and crimson, the participants in this strange drama began to disperse. Evelyn and her accomplices were taken to Cairo to face trial. Dr. Pemberton and Professor Blackwood were led away in custody. Sir Reginald sat alone in his tent, a broken man contemplating the ruins of his career and family. Victoria and Miss Rhodes stood together near the Great Pyramid, so mother and daughter reunited but uncertain of their future. Poirot watched them with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. They have a long road ahead of them, he observed to Hastings. The wounds of 25 years do not heal quickly, but perhaps in time they will find peace. And what of the curse of Khaemwaset? Hastings asked with a slight smile. Was there any truth to it after all? Poirot chuckled. The curse, mon ami, was very real, but it was not supernatural. It was the curse that all deceivers bring upon themselves, the curse of their own guilt, their own fear, their own twisted logic. Ahmed Hassan died because he pursued truth. Lady Ashford died because she hesitated between greed and conscience. Evelyn will spend years in prison because she allowed revenge to consume her. And Professor Blackwood must live with the knowledge that his abandonment of his family led to murder and destruction. He turned to look at the tomb entrance, where workers were now beginning the process of dismantling Evelyn's elaborate forgery. As for Prince Khaemwaset, whether he truly existed or was simply a legend, we may never know. But his story, true or false, has taught us a valuable lesson about the dangers of ambition unchecked by morality. Inspector Rashid joined them, wiping dust from his uniform. Monsieur Poirot, I must thank you for your assistance in this case. Without your insight, we might never have unraveled the full extent of the conspiracy. You are too kind, Inspector. It was Miss Victoria who did the real detective work. I merely observed and drew conclusions from her careful documentation. Nevertheless, your contribution was invaluable. Inspector Rashid extended his hand, and Poirot shook it warmly. I hope this experience has not soured you on Egypt entirely. We are not all frauds and murderers. Poirot smiled. Of that, I have no doubt. Egypt has given the world wonders beyond measure. The pyramids, the Sphinx, a civilization of incredible achievement. That legacy is far more powerful than any curse, real or imagined. As night fell over Giza, the camp slowly settled into an uneasy quiet. The workers, relieved that the curse had been revealed as human wickedness rather than supernatural vengeance, began to pack up the equipment. Tomorrow, they would return to their villages with an extraordinary story to tell, a story of murder and deception, of family betrayal and unexpected heroism played out in the shadow of the eternal pyramids. Sir Poirot sat outside his tent, sipping a cup of mint tea that one of the Egyptian workers had kindly prepared for him. The stars blazed overhead with a brilliance impossible in the cities of Europe, and the desert wind carried the timeless scent of sand and stone. A remarkable case, he murmured to himself, and a reminder that the past and present are never as separate as we imagine. The sins of fathers and mothers echo through generations, and the pursuit of glory can blind even the most intelligent minds to basic human decency. Hastings emerged from his own tent, ready for sleep. Coming to bed, Poirot? We have an early start tomorrow for the journey back to Cairo. In a moment, mon ami, I am contemplating the ironies of this case. When Evelyn sought to expose the crimes of the British Empire's theft of Egyptian treasures by committing theft and murder herself. Victoria sought justice for her mother's suffering by allowing another woman to die. Professor Blackwood sought academic glory and instead found disgrace. Sir Reginald pursued the discovery of a lifetime and instead discovered the cost of his own moral failures. And what did Ahmed Hassan seek? Hastings asked quietly. Poirot was silent for a long moment. Ahmed Hassan sought only to serve honorably, to protect those he worked for, and to speak the truth. In that, he was the most heroic of all the players in this drama. His death was the greatest injustice, and the fact that he did not live to see the truth revealed is perhaps the saddest outcome of all. He stood, brushing sand from his impeccable suit. But come, Hastings, tomorrow is a new day, and we must return to our own lives, our own concerns. This chapter of our lives closes, but the book continues. As they prepared to retire, Poirot took one last look at the pyramids, standing eternal against the starlit sky. They had witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the birth and death of civilizations, the endless drama of human ambition and folly. And they would stand long after this small tragedy had faded from memory. Au revoir, Prince Khaemwaset, Poirot whispered. Whether you existed or not, your story has served its purpose. May those who heard it learn wisdom from the suffering it revealed. The desert wind sighed in response, carrying his words away into the vastness of the night. And somewhere in the darkness, the eternal Sphinx smiled her enigmatic smile, a keeper of secrets that would never be fully known. Epilogue. 6 months later, Hercule Poirot received a letter at his London flat. It was postmarked from Cairo and written in a careful, educated hand. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to inform you of recent developments that I think will interest you. Evelyn Carstairs Blackwood was tried and convicted of 2 counts of murder. She received a sentence of life imprisonment. Professor Blackwood received 5 years for conspiracy and fraud. Dr. Pemberton received 3 years, his sentence reduced due to his cooperation and false confession. My father, Sir Reginald Carstairs, has retired from active archaeology. He lives quietly in London, and we are, slowly, attempting to rebuild our relationship. It is difficult, once, and there are days when I cannot bear to speak to him. But my mother reminds me that forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Mother and I have been recognized officially as Sir Reginald's wife and daughter. The scandal was considerable, but Minister Khalil's support helped us weather the worst of it. Mother has written a memoir of her experiences, which will be published next year. She hopes it will help other women in similar situations find the courage to speak their truth. As for me, I have begun my formal studies in Egyptology at the Cairo Museum, sponsored by the Egyptian government. Minister Khalil has been an excellent mentor, teaching me that archaeology is not about glory or possession, but about understanding and preserving the past for all humanity. I carry the weight of my choices every day. See, Ahmed Hassan's widow and children receive a pension funded from what remains of Lady Ashford's estate. Timothy insisted on this arrangement, but no amount of money can restore a husband and father. I live with the knowledge that my pursuit of justice cost 2 innocent lives. That is a burden I will carry forever. Yet I also take some comfort in knowing that Evelyn's conspiracy was exposed, that no false claims will be made on Egypt's heritage based on her forgeries, and that future archaeologists will be more vigilant against such fraud. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for your wisdom and your kindness during those terrible days in Giza. You helped me understand that the pursuit of truth, while noble, must never sacrifice our humanity. With respect and gratitude, Victoria Carstairs. Poirot folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, where he kept correspondence from cases that had touched him particularly deeply. "And so," he murmured, "the curse of Khaemwaset comes to its end. Not with supernatural vengeance, but with human justice, imperfect, painful, but real." He turned to gaze out the window at the London street below, where ordinary people went about their ordinary lives, unaware of the extraordinary dramas that Hercule Poirot had witnessed in his career. "The pyramids endure," he said softly, "but we mortals, we must find our peace in the brief time we have, in the choices we make, in the truth we pursue." And perhaps that is the real lesson of ancient Egypt, that civilizations rise and fall, but the human need for justice, truth, and redemption remains eternal. With that philosophical reflection, Hercule Poirot settled into his favorite chair, adjusted his moustache with satisfaction, and turned his attention to the next puzzle awaiting the exercise of his little grey cells. The case of the pyramid's curse was closed. The end.